On the morning of September 16th, 1992, most of London was waking up to a normal rainy Wednesday. But in a quiet office on the other side of the Atlantic, one man was calmly picking up a phone to give a single order: sell everything. While the British public went about their day, George Soros was initiating a financial assassination. By midnight, the Bank of England would be in ruins. The British government would be humiliated, and Soros would be $1 billion richer. This is the story of how one man's math defeated an empire's pride. In 1990, Britain made a decision that would haunt them for a decade. They joined the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, or the ERM. On paper, it was a beautiful dream, a way to tie European currencies together to create stability and prepare for a future single currency. But for Britain, it was a golden cage. The ERM required the UK to keep the pound's value within a very narrow range against the German mark. It sounds simple, but it forced the British government to fight against the most powerful force in nature: economic reality. Britain was entering a recession, unemployment was rising, and inflation was high. In a normal world, the government would lower interest rates to help its people, but the ERM rules forbade it. To keep the pound's value artificially high, they had to keep interest rates painfully high. The British people were suffering to protect a symbolic exchange rate. This created a massive disconnect between the pound's official price and its actual value. George Soros didn't create this problem. He simply spotted the crack in the foundation before anyone else did. Soros wasn't gambling. He was conducting a forensic audit of a failing system. He knew the British government was bluffing. He famously told his lead trader, Stanley Druckenmiller, "Go for the jugular." His strategy was a classic short. He borrowed billions of pounds and immediately sold them for German marks. He was essentially betting that when the time came to pay the pounds back, they would be much cheaper to buy. He didn't just bet a few million, he bet $10 billion. By flooding the market with pounds, Soros was forcing the price down. It was a direct challenge to the Bank of England. The bank had two choices. They could use their foreign currency reserves to buy back the pounds and keep the price up, or they could raise interest rates so high that people would want to hold pounds again. But Soros knew the bank's reserves were finite, and he knew the British public couldn't handle higher interest rates. He was effectively outspending a central bank, proving that a single determined hedge fund can have more liquidity than a sovereign nation. September 16th, Black Wednesday became a day of absolute panic in the city of London. The Bank of England started the day by buying up pounds as fast as they could, spending nearly $2 billion an hour. It was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a bucket. By 11 a.m., they realized it wasn't working. In a desperate move, they raised interest rates from 10% to 12%. The market didn't even flinch. They just kept selling. 2 hours later, they did the unthinkable. They announced they would raise rates to 15%. This was a nuclear option that would have bankrupted millions of British homeowners. But the market saw the desperation. They realized that if the bank was willing to destroy its own economy to save a currency, they had already lost. The selling intensified. In the trading pits, the atmosphere was electric with fear. The British government was throwing every weapon they had at Soros, but Soros had more ammunition in the form of market sentiment. The bank was bleeding gold, and the world was watching the hemorrhage in real time. At 7 p.m. that evening, the white flag went up. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Norman Lamont, stood before a wall of cameras and announced that Britain was suspending its membership in the ERM. They were letting the pound fall. The stabilizing mechanism had broken, and the pound plummeted 15% against the German mark almost instantly. The gentleman's agreement that was supposed to unify Europe had instead humiliated its most famous member. For the British government, it was a political catastrophe that would keep them out of power for years. But for George Soros, it was the payday of a lifetime. Because he had shorted the pound, his debt was now 15% easier to pay back. After returning the borrowed money, he walked away with a profit of roughly $1 billion. He had broken the Bank of England, not with an army, but with an accounting ledger. This moment changed the world of finance forever, proving that markets are more powerful than governments, and that fixed exchange rates are often just expensive illusions. The fallout of Black Wednesday changed the course of European history. It is the primary reason why the UK never joined the euro. The trauma of 1992 left a deep-seated distrust of European monetary union. It also birthed the era of the super trader. Before Soros, central banks were seen as invincible gods of the economy. After Soros, they were seen as players who could be beaten if you had enough courage and enough capital. But there is a darker side to the legacy. Many argue that Soros didn't just win a trade, he exploited a national crisis for personal gain, leaving the British taxpayer to pick up the multi-billion-dollar bill. For the student of economic history, Black Wednesday is the ultimate lesson in price discovery. You can manipulate a price with laws and treaties for a while, but eventually, the market will find the truth. Whether you see Soros as a hero of market efficiency or a predator of national stability, one thing is certain. He proved that in the digital age, a single man with a phone can be more powerful than a centuries-old empire. The Bank of England was supposed to stabilize the economy. Since that day in 1992, we've seen the dot-com bubble, the 2008 crash, and the inflation of the 2020s. If you hired a bodyguard to protect you and he let you get mugged every decade, would you keep paying him? In our next episode, we're going to look at the moment the safety net finally broke, the 1971 Nixon shock. Subscribe and turn on notifications. You need to understand these moments because they explain why your money buys less every year. My question for you, was Soros a market genius or an economic predator? Let me know in the comments. Class dismissed.